Good day, everyone. This is Dr. Soper here, and today I'll be discussing the sixth topic in our series of lessons on information privacy and security, with today's topic focusing on encryption concepts. As with most areas of inquiry, encryption has its own specialized set of jargon words, and in order to provide a solid basis for understanding encryption concepts, I wanted to take a moment to briefly review and define some of the commonest terms that are used in discussions of encryption. First among these is the term encryption itself. Encryption simply refers to the process of encoding a message or encoding data so that its meaning is not obvious. Encryption is a part of cryptography, which refers to the art and science of keeping a message secure. Cryptanalysis, by contrast, refers to the art and science of breaking an encoded message. Cryptology, then, is a high-level umbrella term that is used to describe the field which includes both cryptography and cryptanalysis. Since encryption involves encoding a message such that the meaning of the message is not obvious, we need a convenient way of talking about the different forms in which a message might appear. And for this purpose, we have the terms plain text and ciphertext. Plain text, which is also known as clear text, is the term that is used to refer to the original unencrypted form of a message. By convention, plain text is typically written in uppercase in order to distinguish it from ciphertext. Ciphertext, then, simply refers to the encrypted form of a message, and by convention, ciphertext is written in lowercase in order to distinguish it from plain text. With an understanding of these six terms, encryption, cryptography, cryptanalysis, cryptology, plain text, and ciphertext, you will be well equipped to learn more about encryption. As noted earlier, cryptography refers to the art and science of keeping messages secure. And one of the most fundamental tools that we have available for this purpose is encryption. Encryption seeks to protect the content of a message by encoding or converting the message into a form that cannot be easily understood. For this purpose, an encryption algorithm can be used in order to convert plain text into ciphertext and vice versa. The basic model of cryptography, then, involves protecting a plain text message by running the message through an encryption algorithm, the result of which is an encoded or enciphered version of the original message. The original unencoded version of the message can then be recovered by running the encoded version of the message, which is known as ciphertext, through a decryption algorithm. Note that encryption algorithms often rely on a mechanism known as a key. A key can be applied during the process of encrypting a message or during the process of decrypting a message, such that the relationship between the plain text and ciphertext versions of the message depends not only upon the encryption algorithm, but also upon the value of the key. In the keyed encryption paradigm, the relationship between an encryption algorithm and a key is directly analogous to the relationship between a physical lock and the physical key for that lock. In order to be financially viable, the manufacturer of a physical lock will mass produce thousands, if not millions, of the same lock. Each lock is then individualized by configuring it to work only with a specific physical key. Encryption algorithms and keys in the keyed encryption paradigm have exactly the same relationship. The encryption algorithm itself is standardized so that it can be widely distributed and installed on many different devices. Many encryption algorithms are even open source. The value of the key, however, individualizes the encryption algorithm. A plain text message run through an encryption algorithm with one key will therefore produce very different ciphertext than if the same plain text message were run through the same encryption algorithm using a different key. Broadly speaking, a cryptosystem is a system which has been designed to allow messages to be encrypted and decrypted in a particular way. Cryptosystems can be largely classified into two categories: keyless cryptosystems and keyed cryptosystems. In a keyless cryptosystem, the relationship between the plaintext and ciphertext versions of a message depends wholly and exclusively on the encryption algorithm. Keyless cryptosystems are generally much less secure than keyed cryptosystems because anyone who is able to gain access to the algorithm will be able to decipher every message that has been encoded using the keyless cryptosystem. A classic example of a keyless cryptosystem is the Caesar cipher, which we will discuss shortly. Unlike a keyless cryptosystem, a keyed cryptosystem relies on a cryptographic key in order to protect the contents of a message. The enciphered or encrypted version of the message, then, depends not only on the encryption algorithm, but also upon the value of the key. Keyed cryptosystems can be further divided into two major groups, namely symmetric key systems and asymmetric key systems. In a symmetric key system, the same key value is used for both encrypting and decrypting a message. By contrast, in an asymmetric key system, one key value is used to encrypt a message, while a very different key value is used to decrypt the message. This would be analogous to a situation in which you would need to use one physical key to lock your front door, while you would need to use a very different physical key in order to unlock your front door. Note that in modern computing, asymmetric key systems are commonly referred to as public key systems. Cryptanalysis is the art and science of breaking encoded messages. Depending upon the situation, cryptanalysis might be undertaken in pursuit of one or more specific objectives. First, cryptanalysis might be used in an effort to break a single message. Second, a cryptanalysis might be conducted with the goal of finding patterns in encrypted messages. Such patterns can then be used as input for additional cryptanalytic activities that are seeking to actually break messages. Third, cryptanalysis might be conducted in an effort to infer valuable knowledge from encrypted messages without actually breaking the encryption code itself. In the context of war, for example, an unusual spike in the volume of encrypted messages that are being sent between enemy troops may indicate an impending attack, or the node on the network that generates the most encrypted messages may be the enemy's headquarters. A fourth possible objective of cryptanalysis is to deduce an encryption or decryption key so that future encrypted messages can be easily or quickly broken. Finally, cryptanalysis might be conducted with a view toward identifying vulnerabilities in an encryption algorithm. This sort of analysis can help the designers of encryption algorithms to determine whether their algorithms are secure and reliable. From the perspective of information security, it is important to remember that there are no rules when it comes to cryptanalysis. Put another way, we must expect an attacker to use any method, tool, or technique that she has at her disposal in order to break an encrypted message. One of the more interesting notions related to encryption is that from a theoretical perspective, it is indeed possible to devise an unbreakable cryptosystem. Any cryptosystem that is sufficiently practical to be used regularly in the real world, however, can almost certainly be broken given enough time and enough computing power. With this point in mind, it should be understood that one of the philosophical principles underlying a practical cryptosystem is not to implement an unbreakable cipher, but rather to create a cipher that, in consideration of current computing capabilities, would be so difficult or so time-consuming to break that efforts to do so would not be worthwhile. An encrypted military message, for example, may be theoretically breakable, but it would not be worthwhile to try to break the encrypted message if doing so would require many years. Let's explore this idea further with a mathematical example. Imagine that we want to break an encrypted message which is composed of only 25 characters. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume that the message is written in uppercase English, such that there are only 26 possible unique characters, that is, the uppercase English letters ranging from A to Z. In this scenario, there would be a total of 26 to the 25th power, or approximately 10 to the 35th power, possibilities for the message, with only one of these possibilities being correct. If we were to use a brute force approach that enabled us to check 10 billion, that is 10 to the 10th power, possibilities per second, then it would take a total of 10 to the 25th seconds to check every possibility. As a point of reference, consider that 10 to the 25th power seconds is approximately 10 billion years, which is only slightly less than the age of the universe. Clearly, using a brute force approach to break such a message is not feasible with our current computing technologies. What would happen then if we were to abandon our brute force strategy in favor of a more intelligent approach, such as one which relies upon statistical methods? Well, if we were to adopt such an approach, we could reduce the number of possibilities from 10 to the 35th power to approximately 10 to the 15th power. At 10 billion decryptions per second, it would take only 10 to the 5th seconds to check every possibility. Note that 10 to the 5th power seconds is equal to approximately 1.2 days, which of course is a much more appealing length of time than the 10 billion years that would be required by the brute force method. Encryption algorithms commonly rely upon numerical codes to represent the various unique characters that might appear in a message. As a simple example, imagine that we are designing an encryption algorithm to encode messages that are comprised only of uppercase English letters, that is, the letters capital A through capital Z. Since there are 26 possible letters, we can represent each unique letter by using the numbers 0 through 25, such that the letter A equals 0, the letter B equals 1, the letter C equals 2, and so forth up through the letter Z being equal to 25. The name Dan, D-A-N, then, would be represented numerically as 3, 0, 13. With this sort of numerical coding scheme in place, we now have the very powerful capability of being able to perform mathematical operations on our 26 letters. The letter A plus 2, for example, would be equal to the letter C, just as the letter D minus 2 would be equal to the letter B. Note that operations are circular, such that the letter Z plus 1 would be equal to the letter A, or the letter X plus 4 would be equal to the letter B. These types of mathematical operations on the various characters contained within a message form the basis of most modern encryption algorithms. A cipher is an algorithm or a well-defined series of steps through which plain text can be converted into ciphertext, or vice versa. Broadly speaking, there are three major types of ciphers: substitution ciphers, transposition ciphers, and product ciphers. In a substitution cipher, one character is swapped or exchanged for another, with the goal of producing confusion. As a simple example, a substitution cipher might be designed such that to convert plain text into ciphertext, the letter A becomes the letter B, the letter B becomes the letter C, and so forth. The plain text name Dan would thus become the letters EBO using this cipher. To convert the ciphertext back into the original plain text, the process is simply reversed. To restore the plain text in the previous example, the letter B would thus become the letter A, the letter C would become the letter B, and so forth. In a transposition cipher, which is also known as a permutation cipher, the order of the characters in the original message is rearranged with the goal of producing diffusion. As a simple example, a transposition cipher might be implemented which converts plain text into ciphertext by simply reversing the order of the plain text. The plain text name Dan would thus become NAD, N-A-D, using this cipher. As with the substitution cipher, converting the ciphertext back into the original plain text requires only that the process be reversed. Finally, a product cipher is a cipher in which two or more transformations are applied to a message in the process of creating the final ciphertext. The goal of using a product cipher is to create ciphertext that is more secure than if only a single transformation had been applied to a message. One way of achieving multiple transformations is to use multiple ciphers. A plain text message, for example, might first be run through a substitution cipher, after which the resulting ciphertext would then be run through a transposition cipher in order to produce the final ciphertext. Another way of achieving multiple transformations is to run plain text through several iterations of the same cipher. A plain text message, for example, might first be run through a substitution cipher, after which the resulting ciphertext would be run again through the same substitution cipher. Most modern encryption algorithms are product ciphers, which employ multiple iterations of both substitution and transposition in order to generate the final ciphertext. The Caesar cipher is a simple, rule-based cipher which was, according to Suetonius, used by Julius Caesar to ensure that the contents of important messages remain secret while in transit. The Caesar cipher employs a simple letter shifting rule such that each letter in the plaintext message is replaced by the third letter following it. The letter A would thus become the letter D, the letter B would become the letter E, and so forth. Using the Caesar cipher, the plaintext name Dan, D-A-N, would thus become the letters G, D, Q. Note that the Caesar cipher is a substitution cipher. In the modern era, we may scoff at the Caesar cipher or find it amusing that it was so simple, but it is important to remember the historical context in which the Caesar cipher was used. During Caesar's time, very few people could even read. Several different methods might be used in an effort to break a message which has been encoded using a substitution cipher. One method of attack is to use an exhaustive search, that is, a brute force attack. If the key space is sufficiently small, then a reasonable strategy is to try all possible keys. A simple letter-shifting substitution cipher, such as the Caesar cipher, for example, has only 26 possible keys, and it would therefore not be particularly challenging or excessively time-consuming to simply try each possible key until the correct key is found. It may not be feasible, however, to break a more sophisticated substitution cipher using a brute force approach. A useful strategy for attacking more complex substitution ciphers is to employ a statistical approach. Statistical methods of attacking substitution ciphers are commonly based upon knowledge of the frequencies with which letters are distributed in the normal, unencrypted written form of a language. Recall that a substitution cipher swaps one character for another. Using English as an example, by determining the relative frequency with which characters in the ciphertext compare to the frequencies of letters in normal unencrypted English, characters in the ciphertext can be readily mapped to characters in normal written English. In normal English writing, for example, the likelihood of any given letter being an E is approximately 13%. Thus, if the letter H comprises approximately 13% of a message that has been encrypted using a substitution cipher, then it is likely that the substitution cipher transforms the letter E into the letter H. In general terms, this approach to cryptanalysis is called a frequency analysis. The Vigenère cipher is a polyalphabetic substitution cipher which uses a keyword or phrase in conjunction with a lookup table, known as a Vigenère tableau, in order to encrypt or decrypt a message. For example, imagine that we want to encode the plaintext message "big secret" using the keyword lock. Since the plaintext message contains 9 characters, not counting spaces, while the keyword only contains 4 characters, the keyword will need to be repeated as necessary in order to match the length of the plaintext message. In this case, the keyword would be extended to LOCK, LOCKL. Each letter in the plaintext and its associated key letter are then used in conjunction with a lookup table in order to find the proper ciphertext letter to substitute for the given plaintext letter. Using the plaintext and keyword from this example in conjunction with the Vigenère tableau shown here will thus produce the ciphertext MWI-CPQ-VOE. The most pronounced weakness of the Vigenère cipher is its use of a comparatively short key. In our discussion of the Vigenère cipher, for example, we used the keyword lock, which contains only 4 characters. A one-time pad is a variation of the Vigenère cipher that addresses this short key problem by using a key that is exactly as long as the plaintext message itself. From an historical perspective, it is interesting to note that the one-time pad method was used extensively during the Cold War. To implement a one-time pad cipher, both the sender and the receiver of a message need to have identical pads that contain many pages of non-repeating characters. For our purposes, let's assume that the one-time pad has 500 characters per page. If the sender wanted to encode a 3,000 character message, she would thus need to use 6 pages from the pad in order to have a non-repeating key whose length matched the length of the plaintext message. The sender would then encode each of the 3,000 letters in the message using its corresponding letter from the 3,000 character key and a lookup table. After encoding the message, she would then destroy the 6 pages from the one-time pad and transmit the message. Upon receipt of the encoded message, the receiver would use the same 6 pages from her matching one-time pad to decode the message, after which the pages would be removed from the pad and destroyed. The major advantage of using a one-time pad is that the key is random and always changing. There are, however, several disadvantages to using a one-time pad cipher. First, the one-time pad approach requires perfect synchronization between the sender and the receiver. A single corrupted or undelivered message would destroy the synchronization and make further secure communication impossible. Second, a way is needed to distribute and store the keypads securely. Third, the statistical frequency distributions of the ciphertext that results from using a one-time pad are still not perfectly flat. When a non-flat frequency distribution exists, it is theoretically possible to break an encrypted message. Just as a one-time pad is a variation of the Vigenère cipher, the Vernam cipher is a variation of the one-time pad. The Vernam cipher works by utilizing a non-repeating, arbitrarily long series of random numbers as the key. To preserve the secrecy of encoded messages, only the sender and the receiver should have access to this series of numbers. With the series of random key numbers in place, the actual encryption algorithm for the Vernam cipher is quite straightforward. Each successive plaintext character is simply combined with its corresponding random number using a Boolean exclusive OR operation in order to generate the next ciphertext character. Combining each ciphertext character with its corresponding random key number using the same Boolean exclusive OR operation will restore the original plaintext. Note that if the numbers that are used as the key in a Vernam cipher are truly random and non-repeating, then there is no way to determine how a particular plaintext character was enciphered. Put another way, if a truly random series of numbers is used as the key, then the Vernam cipher is theoretically unbreakable. The Vernam approach is the only known theoretically unbreakable cipher. Like a Vernam cipher, a book cipher is also a variation of a one-time pad. Rather than using a specially generated series of random numbers as the key, however, a book cipher instead uses a book, or another form of printed media, such as a poem, a piece of music, a newspaper, a phone book, or so forth, as a source of characters for the key. Beginning at a predetermined point in the book, the letters in the book are used just like a one-time pad. As an example, imagine that we wish to encode the message, "Meet Agent 133 tonight at 10 o'clock near Pont Neuf." Now imagine that we have arranged to use the novel A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens as the encryption key. Beginning on the first page of the book, the encryption key for our message would be, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." Book ciphers are convenient insofar as books are readily available and can be easily replaced if lost or confiscated. Further, a person carrying a book would likely be seen by a law enforcement officer as much less suspicious than would a person who is apprehended with a secret pad that contains page after page of random characters. Unfortunately, written media have predictable statistical properties, and this makes a message encoded using a book cipher easier to break than if the same message were encoded using a series of random characters. What's more, a third party who suspects that a book cipher is being used may be able to easily acquire a copy of the keybook, which would present obvious problems for the security of an encoded message. Recall that a transposition cipher relies on an algorithm which rearranges the order of the letters that appear in a plaintext message. A columnar transposition cipher is a transposition cipher that works by transposing the plaintext of a message into several columns. The ciphertext version of the message is then produced by reading the resulting rows in sequence from left to right. For example, imagine that we begin with the plaintext secret, and that we transpose the plaintext into two columns. The result would be one column which contains the letters SEC, and another column which contains the letters RET. The ciphertext would then be generated by reading the rows from left to right, top to bottom. In this example, the resulting ciphertext would thus be SREECT. Note that the key in a columnar transposition is the number of columns. In the example discussed above, the key would be 2. A rail fence transposition cipher is very similar to a columnar transposition cipher, with the major difference being that in a rail fence transposition cipher, a plain text message is transposed into several rows rather than being transposed into several columns, as with a columnar transposition cipher. The ciphertext version of the message is then produced by reading the resulting columns in sequence from top to bottom, left to right. For example, imagine that we begin with the plain text, "The Big Bang Theory," and that we transpose the plain text into 2 rows or rails. The result would be one row, which contains the letters THEBIGBA, and another column, which contains the letters NGTHEORY. The ciphertext would then be generated by reading the columns from top to bottom, left to right. In this example, the resulting ciphertext would thus be TNHGETBHIEGOBRAY. Note that the key in a rail fence transposition is the number of rails or rows. In the example discussed above, the key would thus be 2. To understand the commonest way in which transposition ciphers are attacked, it is first necessary to understand the concept of an engram. In the context of cryptanalysis, an engram is simply a character string of length n. The set of digrams or 2-grams for the English language would thus be AA, AB, AC, and so forth up to ZZ, or ZZ if you happen to have learned British English. The set of trigrams or 3-grams would be AAA, AAB, AAC, and so forth up through ZZZ. The set of tetragrams or 4-grams would be AAAA, AAAB, and so forth up through ZZZZ. If the unigram or 1-gram frequencies in a ciphertext message match the 1-gram frequencies in normal English, then the ciphertext was probably created with a transposition cipher. Why? Because a transposition cipher only rearranges plain text letters. It doesn't replace them with other letters like a substitution cipher. To break the transposition cipher, n-grams in the ciphertext with the highest frequencies are identified, beginning with n equals 2. The ciphertext is then split into n columns, or n rows in the case of a rail fence transposition cipher, according to a pattern that allows the letters comprising the n-gram to lie adjacent to one another, after which a solution is sought. If no solution is found, then n is incremented so that we would next use 3 grams, and the process is repeated. If a solution is still not found, n is incremented to 4, and then 5, and so forth until a solution is found. Recall that a product cipher is a cipher in which 2 or more transformations are applied to a message in the process of creating the final ciphertext. The goal of using a product cipher is to create ciphertext that is more secure than if only a single transformation had been applied to a message. Product ciphers are also known as combination ciphers because product ciphers typically combine substitution and transposition ciphers, multiple iterations of the same cipher, or both. As an example of a product cipher algorithm, a plaintext message might first be run through a substitution cipher using key number 1. The ciphertext that results from this process might then be run through a transposition cipher. The ciphertext emerging from the transposition cipher might then be run through another substitution cipher using key number 2. Finally, this entire process might be repeated several times with the goal of creating ciphertext that is more secure than if only a single cipher had been used. Note that a poorly designed product cipher might produce ciphertext that is no more secure than if any of its individual components had been used alone. In 1949, Claude Shannon, who is often referred to as the father of information theory, proposed a set of 5 criteria for creating good ciphers. Shannon's first criterion is that the degree of secrecy that is needed should determine the amount of labor required in order to encipher a message. As was noted in an earlier lesson, the value of information tends to decline over time, and as such, the additional computational labor that would be required to protect the secrecy of a message for thousands of years may not be defensible from the perspective of information theory. Shannon's second criterion for good ciphers states that both cryptographic keys and encryption algorithms should be free from complexity. An encryption algorithm should be able to encipher any plain text using any allowable key without the algorithm being too complex to understand. Continuing this theme, Shannon's third criterion states that the implementation of the cipher should be as simple as possible. Complexity often leads to errors and is therefore not desirable in the context of encryption algorithms. Shannon's fourth criterion for good ciphers is that the propagation of errors should be limited. If an error occurs in the encipherment or transmission of an encrypted message, then the effects of that error should be constrained. A single error should not invalidate the entire ciphertext. Finally, Shannon's fifth criterion states that the size of a ciphertext message or the amount of storage required for the message should be restricted. Under no circumstances should the size of the ciphertext exceed the size of the plain text from which it was derived. From an historical perspective, it is interesting to note that these 5 criteria were proposed at the very beginning of the computer age and are still perfectly valid today. In addition to Shannon's criteria, there are several additional criteria for good ciphers that are desirable from a commercial perspective. First, a commercially viable cipher must have a sound mathematical basis. Second, the security of a cipher must be verified through expert analysis before it is used commercially. It is critical that such analyses be conducted by disinterested third parties rather than being conducted exclusively by advocates of the proposed encryption algorithm. Third, a commercially viable encryption algorithm must stand the test of time. Flaws in many encryption algorithms are discovered soon after their release, but even long-term success is not a guarantee of perpetual success. One of the 2 major types of cryptosystems is known as a symmetric cryptosystem, or sometimes as secret key encryption. The symmetry that is being referenced in the name symmetric cryptosystem refers to the fact that a symmetric encryption algorithm uses the same key to both encrypt and decrypt a message. The key itself is referred to as a secret key, and the security of a symmetric cryptosystem is predicated on the notion that only the sender and the receiver will know the value of the secret key. To preserve the security of a symmetric cryptosystem, the key can therefore only be transmitted via a secure channel, such as an in-person exchange or by means of an encrypted network. One of the interesting properties of symmetric cryptosystems is that as long as the key remains secret, possession of the key provides authentication. Put another way, if a person receives an encrypted message that can be successfully decrypted using a key that is truly only known to herself and the sender of the message, then the fact that the secret key can decrypt the message proves the identity of the sender. A major problem with symmetric cryptosystems is ensuring the security of the channel over which the key is transmitted. If two parties wish to communicate securely over a network using a symmetric cryptosystem, then they would need to exchange a secret key using a secure channel. But how can a secure encrypted channel be established through which the key can be shared if establishing a secure channel requires that both parties already have a secret key? This dilemma is known as the key exchange problem. Another major problem with symmetric cryptosystems relates to the number of unique keys that is needed for large numbers of people to securely communicate. To ensure security, a separate key is needed for each communicating sender-receiver pair. For n communicating users, we would thus need n times n-1 over 2 keys. For a small number of users, this is not particularly problematical. As the number of users who wish to securely communicate grows, however, both the total number of keys required and the number of keys required for each user grow dramatically. The second of the two major types of cryptosystems is known as an asymmetric cryptosystem, or sometimes as public key encryption. In an asymmetric cryptosystem, one key is used to encrypt a message and a very different key is used to decrypt the message. In the context of public key encryption, the encryption key is called the public key, while the decryption key is called the private key. Asymmetric cryptosystems eliminate the key exchange and key distribution problems that are often encountered with symmetric key systems. Key distribution is quite straightforward when using an asymmetric cryptosystem. To understand how key exchange works in a public key encryption system, consider first that the person who wishes to receive a message will need to create an encryption key, that is, a public key, and its associated decryption key, that is, a private key. Remember that these two keys are very different from each other. The receiver will then freely distribute her public key to anyone who wants to send her an encrypted message. Note that there is no need for her to transmit her public key over a secure channel, because only her private key can decode a message that has been encrypted with her public key. The sender will then encrypt a message using the receiver's public key and will then transmit the encrypted message to the receiver. The secrecy of the message is ensured because only the receiver's private key can decrypt the message, and the receiver is the only person who has her private key. Asymmetric cryptosystems enable secure transactions on the internet by resolving the key exchange problem. Unfortunately, asymmetric encryption is commonly at least 10,000 times slower than symmetric key encryption, and for this reason, it is symmetric encryption rather than public key encryption that serves as the true workhorse of secure communications over the internet. The public key approach is thus used for the purpose of securely exchanging a symmetric key, after which the two communicating parties use the symmetric key to establish symmetric encryption-based secure communications with each other. A stream cipher is a symmetric key cipher in which each plaintext character is combined with a character from a key stream in order to produce a ciphertext character. This process of encrypting plain text takes place one character at a time, thus facilitating rapid communication by producing a ciphertext output stream that can begin to be transmitted to the receiver immediately. By contrast, some ciphers require that the entire contents of a plaintext message be encrypted before the final form of the ciphertext will be known, thus preventing the ciphertext from being transmitted until the entire encryption process is complete. There are, however, several important problems associated with stream ciphers. The first of these problems is related to synchronization. If a keystream character is dropped or lost during the encryption process, then every ciphertext character received thereafter will be decrypted incorrectly. Similarly, if a ciphertext character is dropped or lost while in transit to the receiver, then every ciphertext character received thereafter will also be decrypted incorrectly. Such problems can only be identified and corrected if a synchronization and recovery system is in place. The second major problem associated with stream ciphers is linked to cryptanalysis. Because characters in the message are encrypted and transmitted one at a time, it is feasible for part of the message to be intercepted and decrypted without needing to intercept the entire message. This makes stream ciphers theoretically easier to break than many other ciphers. Finally, to preserve security with stream ciphers, the same key can never be used twice. If two distinct messages are sent using the same key, then the stream cipher can be cracked. A block cipher is a symmetric key cipher that is designed to operate on fixed-length segments of a message, which are known as blocks. In the context of secure communication between parties, a block cipher will encrypt a group of plaintext characters of a fixed size, that is, a block, all at once, and then send the result to the receiver. The process is then repeated until the entire plaintext message has been encrypted and sent. As an example, imagine that we have a plaintext message that contains 24 characters, and that our block cipher operates on 8-character blocks. The algorithm would begin by encrypting the first 8 characters of the message, after which the resulting ciphertext would be transmitted to the receiver. The algorithm would then encrypt the next 8 characters of the message, after which the resulting ciphertext would once again be transmitted to the receiver. The process would conclude by the algorithm encrypting the final 8 characters of the original message and then transmitting the final part of the ciphertext to the receiver. In the early 1970s, the National Bureau of Standards, or NBS, which has since been renamed to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, recognized the need of the general public for a secure cryptographic standard. This need emerged because existing U.S. government cryptographic systems that were in use at the time by agencies such as the Department of Defense, FBI, CIA, and so forth were not meant for public use, and because problems were beginning to arise with the proliferation of commercial encryption devices. Not only were such commercial devices incompatible with each other, but the algorithms upon which they relied had not been extensively tested by independent reviewers. In 1972, the NBS therefore requested proposals for a public cryptosystem. The criteria specified by the NBS for the system were that it be highly secure, easy to understand, publishable, available to all at no cost, adaptable to diverse applications, economical, efficient to use, able to be validated, and suitable for export. There is also speculation that the government desired a crypto system that was not excessively strong, such that it could be broken if necessary. In 1974, IBM proposed its Lucifer encryption system, which ultimately became the basis for the Data Encryption Standard, or DES. The proposed algorithm was tested privately by the National Security Agency, that is the NSA, and by the general public. In 1976, DES was adopted as the U.S. standard for encrypting sensitive but unclassified data and for encrypted communication. The standard was later adopted by the International Standards Organization, the ISO, and became widely used by governments and companies throughout the world. The DES algorithm can be characterized as a block cipher. DES is also a product cipher since it implements multiple encryption techniques and transformations. The algorithm itself applies 16 rounds of iterations of encryption to the original plaintext, including multiple substitution rounds to ensure confusion and multiple transposition or permutation rounds to ensure diffusion. Each of the 16 rounds of encryption uses its own unique round key, which is derived from the user-supplied key. Despite this seeming complexity, in reality, DES is easy to implement in both software and hardware devices. Even from early on, researchers and other interested parties have expressed concerns about the DES algorithm. In 1977, for example, Diffie and Hellman predicted that only a few more years would be required until advancements in technology would allow DES to be broken in just a few days. Another concern with the DES algorithm is that it uses a fixed length key of only 56 bits. Note that the actual key space is 64 bits, but the final 8 bits are used simply as a checksum and are not a part of the actual key itself. With a 56-bit key, DES provides for only 2 to the 56th power total unique keys, which is approximately equivalent to 10 to the 15th power unique keys. Evidence has been accumulating in the past few decades that this 56-bit key structure is now too short to ensure security. In 1997, DES was officially cracked for the first time by a group of 3,500 computers, with the process requiring 4 months. A year later, in 1998, DES was cracked by expensive, specially designed hardware in just 4 days. By 2008, DES could be cracked with inexpensive, commercially available hardware in less than 1 day. Aside from these very real technical concerns, DES has been criticized because many of the algorithm's design decisions were kept classified and were never made public. Many conspiracy theorists therefore believe that DES may have backdoors or weaknesses which they speculate were introduced for the purpose of facilitating government access to encrypted data. In an effort to better secure their valuable data, many organizations adopted a process known as double DES, which simply involves running data twice through the DES algorithm using 2 separate keys. As an example, a plain text message might be run through the DES algorithm using key number 1. The resulting ciphertext would then be run through the DES algorithm again using key number 2 in order to produce the final ciphertext. This strategy was expected to double the strength of the encryption, but later detailed analyses showed that this was not true. On the contrary, it was concluded by researchers that running data twice through the DES algorithm provided only slightly better security than running data through the algorithm just once. Naturally, this led security personnel to wonder what would happen if data were run through the DES algorithm 3 times, a process known as triple DES. After detailed analysis, triple DES was found to effectively double the key length from the original 56 bits to 112 bits. A key of this length is quite strong, even for today's fastest computers. Using triple DES thus makes DES enciphered data much harder to break. In the modern era, the DES algorithm can at best be considered only somewhat secure. The first successful attack on the algorithm in 1997 required 3,500 computers, 4 months, and a lot of cooperation. The 1998 attack took only 4 days, but required special-purpose hardware that was very expensive. The 2008 attack showed that DES could be easily defeated with inexpensive, commercially available hardware, thus demonstrating that both single and double DES must now be considered essentially insecure. Since triple DES effectively doubles the DES key length from 56 to 112 bits, cracking triple DES is still considered to be beyond the capabilities of modern commercially available systems. Nevertheless, in 1995, the US government began laying the groundwork for a new, stronger encryption standard, despite the fact that DES had not yet been officially cracked. At the time, it was speculated by some that the search for a stronger standard emerged in reaction to evidence that US adversaries could now easily break the original DES cipher. In 1997, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, requested proposals for a new encryption standard. Criteria for the new standard included that the code for the algorithm must be unclassified and publicly disclosed. Further, the algorithm had to be royalty-free worldwide, had to implement a symmetric block cipher that would operate on 128-bit blocks of data, and had to be usable with keys that were 128, 192, and 256 bits in length. The response to the request for proposals was robust, and in 1998, 15 algorithms were selected as semifinalists. After further analysis of the semifinalists, 5 finalists were selected in 1999, including the Mars algorithm by IBM, the RC6 algorithm by RSA Laboratories, the Reindahl algorithm by Joan Damon and Vincent Ryman, the Serpent algorithm by Ross Anderson, Eli Behem, and Lars Knudsen, and the Two-Fish algorithm by Bruce Schneier and his colleagues. The 5 finalist algorithms were subjected to extensive evaluation and scrutiny in both public and private arenas. The 3 key criteria by which the finalist algorithms were evaluated included security, efficiency of operation, and the ease with which the algorithm could be implemented in software. Following 2 years of analysis, the Reindahl algorithm was selected as the winner in 2001. The name of the algorithm is a portmanteau of the names of its Belgian creators, Vincent Ryman and Joan Damon. Reindahl was adopted by the US government as Federal Information Processing Standard 197, or FIPS 197, and was thereafter known as the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. AES has been used extensively worldwide since 2002. AES is a symmetric key algorithm. It is similar to DES in that it uses a cyclic approach which involves subjecting the original plain text to multiple rounds or iterations of cryptographic transformation. AES operates on 128-bit blocks of plain text and is hence a block cipher. The number of iterations or rounds of transformation to which each block is subjected depends upon the length of the user-supplied key. If the user supplies a 128-bit key, the algorithm will subject each block to 10 rounds of cryptographic transformation. If the user supplies a 192-bit key, the algorithm will use 12 rounds of encryption. And if the user supplies a 256-bit key, then the algorithm will use 14 rounds of encryption. Each iteration or round to which a block of plaintext is subjected in the AES algorithm involves a number of specific transformations. First, byte-level substitution is used to provide confusion. Next, row shift transposition is used to provide diffusion. The algorithm then mixes columns, which provides both confusion and diffusion, after which a round key is used to provide further confusion. Note that the column mixing step is omitted in the final round. The AES algorithm is still rather new, so it cannot yet claim to have stood the test of time. Nevertheless, AES has undergone extensive cryptanalysis by both US government and independent experts. Further, the creators of the algorithm have no ties to the NSA or other US government agencies, which lessens suspicions that the algorithm may contain a backdoor. Finally, the AES algorithm has a solid mathematical basis, despite the seemingly simple transformations that are applied during each round of encryption. With respect to the security of the AES algorithm, a related key attack has been developed which can break 9 rounds of 256-bit AES encryption. But since the AES algorithm uses 14 rounds of encryption in the context of a 256-bit key, it still remains secure. At present, the best known algorithm could theoretically recover a 256-bit AES key using 2 to the 254th power operations, which is approximately equal to 2.9 times 10 to the 76th power operations. At 10 billion operations per second, it would take approximately 9.2 times 10 to the 58th power years to break the code. This equates to trillions of times more time than has passed since the beginning of the universe. So, at least for now, AES is considered to be secure. Well, my friends, thus ends our overview of encryption concepts. I hope that you learned something interesting in this lesson, and until next time, have a great day.